What's going on, YouTube? This is SG1 Sports, and I'm going to give you my 5 takeaways from Week 12 of the 2020 college football season. Last week, Week 11, was a boring week. We didn't really see a whole lot going on. We go to Week 12, and there are some big games. A lot of things happened in terms of conference races, playoff picture. We had a lot of close games, exciting games, and obviously there's a lot going on in college football. There are so many teams. It's hard to do 5 takeaways. So I'm trying to just look at the big picture stuff. I'm an Auburn fan, but I'm not going to talk about Auburn in this video because the win over Tennessee really doesn't have, it doesn't really matter in the big picture. And, look at things like Georgia, J.T. Daniels coming in, playing really, really well for them, although they struggled as a team against Mississippi State. That's a big story for a Georgia fan, but for the playoff picture and the conference race picture, it's not really a big deal. So obviously we can't talk about everything. So I have to narrow this down to 5 things. These are the 5 biggest takeaways for me from Week 12. And we start with number 1. We still don't know about Ohio State. And it's interesting here because Ohio State, if they go undefeated, they're probably going to make the college football playoff. But we really don't know that this is a top 4 team. And it's part of having a shortened season, part of having no non-conference games. There's nothing really to compare Ohio State to when you talk about other conferences, so we really just don't know how good this team is. And you look at who they've played, they haven't really played anybody until they play Indiana, and then you say, well, how good is Indiana? We don't really know about Indiana because they hadn't played anybody good. Indiana had played, Rutgers, Michigan, who's been awful this year, Penn State, who hasn't won a football game, Michigan State, who's only won 1 game. I mean, there really wasn't much there from the Indiana side to know definitively that Indiana's a really good team. They might be, but we just don't know. And it's going to be really interesting to see if Ohio State does, in fact, make it into the college football playoff. We get to find out how good this team really is. They might be the best team in college football. They might be. We don't know how good the Big Ten is compared to other conferences. They may not be a top 10 team. Again, we just don't know. And I'm just really curious to see what the committee is going to do with this Ohio State team. We find out this week. We get the first playoff rankings. But you look at them in this game, at times they look dominant. They look like a really, really good team. And then at other times they looked like an average team. They gave up a lot of yards through the air, gave up a lot of big plays, had some turnovers. Some things just weren't great in this game for Ohio State. But then you look at, they were able to run the ball a little better in this game. They were able to stop the run for Indiana. It got to the point where Indiana really didn't even try to run the football. So there were some really good takeaways for Ohio State, but then, again, some struggles. And I just kind of think if Alabama or Clemson or even Notre Dame played Indiana, they would win that game easier than Ohio State did. But I don't know that. It's just a guess, really, because, again, we don't have anything to compare. So that's a big takeaway for me is we just don't know about Ohio State. We don't know moving forward, really. I mean, where are we going to find out about Ohio State? You got Illinois, Michigan State, Michigan left on the schedule. Those teams are not very good. Then you'll have a Big Ten championship game, which is probably going to be against Northwestern now. And we don't know how good Northwestern is because, again, we just don't know how good the Big Ten is. And you could really say that across all of college football because, we really don't know how good the SEC is. They're just playing each other. So that's a big unknown, though, for Ohio State just because they don't play. There's not 4 or 5 really good teams in the Big Ten to where you can kind of compare. Wisconsin's a good team. Northwestern's a good team. I believe Indiana's a good team. That's really about it. And they only play 2 of those 3 teams. So that's why, again, I say you just don't know about Ohio State at this point. But staying in the Big Ten, another big takeaway is in the other division. It's Northwestern. Northwestern now in the driver's seat to win the Big Ten West. Who had this team preseason winning this division? They come off of a rough year last year, but a lot of guys back. A lot of guys that were banged up last year come back. Peyton Ramsey at quarterback for them has given them an immediate boost. They really struggled at quarterback last year, but they were really impressive against Wisconsin. They don't win in the same way that an Alabama or a Florida wins or a Clemson, but they play defense. It's old school football for Northwestern. They play really, really good defense. They're playing, efficient on offense. Also, the defense forcing, I think, 5 turnovers in this game. That was a big reason why they won this game. We've seen enough from Wisconsin to really believe that Wisconsin is a good team this year. Northwestern, they did what they had to do, but you look at the entire schedule for them, they only beat Iowa by 1. They beat Nebraska by 8. Nebraska's not a very good football team. They just lost to Illinois. They beat Purdue by 7. So they really haven't played anyone either. The win over Maryland, 43-3 in the opener, that was definitely an impressive win. The most impressive win, I think, for Northwestern so far, besides this game against Wisconsin. So this is a good football team. It's just, again, how good are they? Well, they are good enough, I believe, to win the Big Ten West. They've got Michigan State, Minnesota, and Illinois left on the schedule. I think they'll win all those games. So Northwestern could be undefeated. Even if they lose to Michigan State or Minnesota on the road, they still are going to go to the Big Ten championship game. So we most likely are going to see Northwestern versus Ohio State in the Big Ten championship game. And it's kind of a contrast of styles there. It's the offense from Ohio State, the defense from Northwestern. Should be an interesting matchup there, and I'm looking forward to seeing what happens. But it appears that that's going to be who we see in the Big Ten championship. All right, my number 3 takeaway, Oklahoma now looks like a top 10 team. Boy, this team was impressive last night against rival Oklahoma State. Both sides of the ball, Oklahoma just dominated this game. They doubled up Oklahoma State in total yards, 492 to 246. They went at 41-13, and it was really about the fast start. They came out really clicking on all cylinders on offense, scoring 21 points in the first quarter. Defensively, they played really well. They've gotten some guys back from suspension. Stevenson on the ground had 141 yards. Ronnie Perkins on defense, he was, just unstoppable. And you see now this Oklahoma team start to play up to their potential. You got to think back to those 2 losses early in the year. Remember, they had big leads in both of those games, and they kind of blew it. Imagine if they had held on in those 2 games and just won those games. This team could potentially be in the college football playoff. Even with just one of those wins, they would be in this conversation. And they're playing right now like they could potentially be a playoff team. Spencer Rattler just really has grown up. You go back to that Texas game, that's when I think it really happened for him. He's really struggled late in games before that, but then they win that game in overtime, and it's just been a different team since that game. A different quarterback in Spencer Rattler. This game he threw for 301 yards, 4 touchdowns, no interceptions. Really a perfect game from him, and just a perfect game across the board for Oklahoma. No turnovers in this one. They were dominant. It was a really impressive performance. Oklahoma State's kind of gone downhill a little bit, but you look at Oklahoma, they're just going up, getting better and better. I think this is clearly the best team in the Big 12 right now. They're going to need a ton of help, but there is a path for them even to make it to the college football playoff with 2 losses. It'll take chaos, and it probably won't happen, but I think this team's going to be ranked pretty high in the initial playoff rankings this week, and depending on where they are, I think that'll tell us if they have really any chance at all to make it into the playoff, which I think very unlikely. But still, this is a really good team, and the way they're playing right now, I think they could play with anyone in the country. Number 4, Coastal Carolina's perfect season continues, but Liberty's ends. We were hoping to get an undefeated matchup between these 2 teams, but it's not going to happen now. Coastal Carolina, just a great win over App State. They had to kind of fight from behind at the end and get it done. Just a really, really impressive win. App State's a good football team. Coastal Carolina is one of the stories of the 2020 season, but unfortunately for Liberty, it will end. They had their field goal late blocked, and there was no timeout. They didn't try to ice the kicker this time. What if that had happened again? That would have been crazy. But this is a very good football team. Liberty is a solid team. Coastal Carolina is a really good team. I don't know that there'll be enough on their resume to get into that playoff conversation. Maybe the New Year's Six. You could be talking about a win over Louisiana, who's in the top 25. App State, who is a good team. Their only other loss coming to undefeated Marshall. Liberty, if they finish with 1 loss, well, it'll be 2 losses if Coastal beats them. That'll be 3 pretty quality wins, plus the Sun Belt Championship game, 4 quality wins. I think Coastal Carolina is moving towards potentially getting into a New Year's Six bowl, but no, I don't think they're a playoff team. But that was a big storyline this weekend. Coastal Carolina staying undefeated, Liberty losing their first game. And our number 5 takeaway, it might not be enough for Cincinnati and the Pac-12. Cincinnati had a pretty tough game with UCF, had to come from behind, and then they got the lead late and held on to it. I just don't know if it's enough. UCF, we know the name, brand, and everything. This is not the same UCF team that we've seen in the past. They had a bunch of opt-outs early in the year. They had 4 of their starters kicked off the team a few weeks ago. This is just not the same UCF. And I think for Cincinnati to make it all the way into the playoff, they were going to have to win every game on their schedule impressively, and this just wasn't an impressive performance. It was a good win. It was a gutsy win. I don't want to take anything away from it, but when you're talking about comparing a Group of 5 team with a Power 5 team, that Group of 5 team has to really be dominant, I think, in every game, and Cincinnati just was not dominant in this game. And so I think this game right here might be enough to keep them out of the playoff. We'll see. I think if they had won this game by 30 or 40 and they continue to blow everyone out, it would be hard to keep Cincinnati out. But now the committee can say, well, they weren't impressive in this game. Maybe they're not that great. I don't know. We'll see what they do this week. This week is going to be really big for Cincinnati to see where they are ranked in the initial playoff rankings. If they're up there at number 6, number 7, they got a really good shot. But if they're at 10 or 11, they're not going to get in, I don't think. And other things have happened for them that have not been good, like SMU losing to Tulsa. I don't think that's good because SMU now maybe going to fall out of the top 25. I mean, it's good because they do play Tulsa still. They needed UCF to be a little bit better this year. This is a 3-loss team now. They needed Houston to be a little bit better. They needed some things to go their way that just have not really gone their way. So I don't know if Cincinnati gets in. And also the Pac-12, I don't really see the Pac-12 getting in. I mean, Oregon was not impressive at all against UCLA. Had to hang on to that game. They haven't really impressed me this year to where I would say that this is a team that can play with the Clemsons or the Alabamas. And then USC, they finally actually did play a good game. Looked pretty solid against Utah, especially in the second half, pulling away in that one. But you got to go back to their first 2 games where they had to come from behind in the fourth quarter. I just don't think there's going to be enough of a resume for these Pac-12 teams, and they're just not winning impressively enough. I'd say Cincinnati, their schedule is probably tougher than any team in the Pac-12. I mean, the Pac-12 is just not very good, and they don't play as many games. So to me, I think an undefeated Cincinnati will stay ahead of an undefeated Pac-12 team. The only thing for the Pac-12 is you have the name brand and then you have the championship game late. So if Oregon and USC are undefeated, that could be your quality win that could maybe bump one of those teams up. But I just don't think it's going to be enough. I do not think Cincinnati or the Pac-12 will make it into the playoff unless there's a lot of chaos. If we see a bunch of upsets, then absolutely they have a chance. I'm not saying they're out of it. I'm just saying it might not be enough. They definitely do not control their own destiny, in my opinion. And ultimately, I think it might keep them out of the college football playoff. We will be talking more about the playoff this week. Of course, the first playoff rankings, that's going to come out Tuesday, and we will be talking about that as well. Would love to get your takeaways from Week 12. Give me your thoughts down in the comments below. Thank you for watching this video, and stay tuned for more here on the SG1 Sports College Football Channel.